I think that many people that view my videos, they believe that I enjoy doing this. I'm some sadist or something. I really don't. I don't. At all. Apparently, there are red flags and risks to going carnivore or adopting a carnivore diet, and we're going to hear all about them from a physician.
The carnivore diet. We've all heard the
No, not the carnivore diet. A carnivore diet, because there are many variations of a carnivore diet, some of which are actually appropriate to be consuming and some of which are not. So, not the carnivore diet.
vanished inflammation, soaring energy, pain-free joints. But what if those benefits came at the cost of skyrocketing cholesterol levels? Could this
Well, so what? That doesn't matter. Cholesterol levels themselves are regulated by your genes and nothing else, first and foremost. So, whatever they are, if you're going to say that they pose a problem, it's about dietary intervention. It's more holistic. It's about external factors, subtraction and addition of more holistic dietary factors than it is with respect to the adoption or the introduction of a synthetic drug or something like that. So, um, there's that. But second of all, the beautiful thing is that cholesterol actually has, in terms of its levels, it's not sufficient to predicting heart disease. It is involved in the heart disease process, but you're not going to have plaque accumulate if you don't have damage to your arteries. Okay, they're called atherosclerotic lesions for a reason.
seemingly miraculous diet be a double-edged sword? As a
Well, could it be? No, I mean, not really. No, because the thing is with respect to this diet, it is the species appropriate, species specific diet for human beings, or at least the best approximation to such a diet, according to the Darwinian principles of evolution and the subsequent principles of indication. We know this from chemical anthropology, observational paleoanthropology, comparative anatomy, and certain elements of biochemistry. It's unequivocal. Every single species has one diet for its speciation, irrespective of each individual genotype within the species. So, anyway, I mean, why would that be a risk then? Unless you want to talk about antagonistic pleiotropy, then we can get down that road. But anyway,
longevity physician, I see the results firsthand. In part one of this series, we explored how
no, you see the associated results of an adoption of a carnivore diet, and again, they're not all the same. Not all people are the same. Their phenotypes are different. The genotypes are different. The results of something or the associated results of something could, if they are causally correlated, could be due to addition, but they could also be due to subtraction. You added in the carnivore diet, yes, but as a result of that, you subtracted other things. When people dramatically reduce their oxalate intake, they can exhibit oxalate dumping. That doesn't mean it was the fault of the carnivore diet approach that they had adopted. Not necessarily. You can understand logically why someone would deduce that, but it doesn't mean that it is actually true. That's why we have to be careful with this. And also a longevity physician. So she's a physician. We need to understand that physicians, if she's going to point to her position as a physician, as giving her the justification for speaking authoritatively about diet, that is not going to be sufficient. I'm not going to jump to conclusions about what she's going to say. I'm just saying if she decides to do that, that is a flawed premise. Going based off of what you learned in school to become a physician is not sufficient. You learned pharmacology, you learned symptomology, you learned, there's one other that I'm thinking of. Um, but either way, I mean, you basically learned symptomology and pharmacology and some etiology of diseases, pathology. That's it. Pathology. You were not taught science, so interpretation of data. You were not taught nutrition, which was probably a good thing. But that's not my point. So, anyway,
and why this all meat approach can work from a scientific perspective for certain people. Today,
well, again, with the whole certain people thing, when we're all members of the same species. Before people say, well, Eddie, don't you say that you can't really perform a controlled science study and see the effects of anything directly on human beings because you can't control for human beings? They're all genotypically and phenotypically different. Um, So then, isn't that a contradiction if you say that and then also say that every single person, irrespective of genotype, has the same diet? Um, Good question, but no, it isn't, because every single species has the same diet, irrespective of genotype. A species appropriate diet does not discriminate based on genotype. It really doesn't even discriminate based on phenotype. However, given how starkly different our lifestyles are today, if you developed inappropriately, then perhaps you actually have a different species appropriate diet, or at least not a different species appropriate diet. It's not like if you develop wrong or improperly, um, that you then have to, oh, well, a vegan diet is now the healthiest for you. Now you just have to eat a vegan diet. Yeah, okay. No. But I think that maybe there's a little bit more variation there. If you know, like maybe you need some 20 grams or so of carbohydrates or something like that. It just depends on how you developed, it seems. So,
We're shifting gears. We're going beyond the simple success stories and social media buzz and delving into the clinical reality. Is the carnivore diet right?
okay, so as soon as you start talking about clinical reality, you are talking about human nutrition science. You are talking about descriptive and inferential statistics, something that you must know thoroughly in order to understand the results of said studies. You have to learn how to interpret the graphs, whether it be a scatter plot, whether it be probability distribution, whether it be a bar graph, whatever it may be. You have to learn how to interpret the confidence intervals and all of that stuff, and the means and the standard deviations and what a standard error is. You have to understand all of that stuff in order to actually analyze the data effectively. Statistical significance, p values, r values, normally distributed, you have to, I mean, residuals, all this. And so if you don't know that, since you're a physician, I'm not saying you don't know it because you're a physician, because I'm a high school graduate. Okay, that's it's really nothing. Um, you can learn a lot nowadays online. Um, so you start talking about that, then we'll start getting into that. But the reason that I bring it up is because human nutrition science is a load of garbage. I'm sorry. You can't inform upon anything of utility at all. We'll get into it, I'm sure.
You? And if so, can you implement it safely and effectively? I'll walk you through my own patient selection matrix and protocols developed through the lens of real clinical practice. We'll uncover who absolutely should avoid this diet and what specific.
No one should absolutely avoid the diet. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. No one should avoid the diet. You're all, we are all human beings. By the way, I'm pretty sure that most of this was written by ChatGPT, including her title. Um, Titles being written by ChatGPT. I mean, okay. Um, but this seems like she's just reading off of an entire script generated by ChatGPT. Gotta say, I understand using ChatGPT and AI for efficiency. I use it all the time. You gotta know how to use it. It's a tool, so you just use it appropriately. But there's a fine line between efficiency and inauthenticity. You got to be very careful with that.
Lab tests are essential before even considering it. I'll also share the precise monitoring protocols I recommend to mitigate risks and maximize benefits.
Purported risks, and in your opinion.
Reality is far more complex than either extreme of carnivore being the enemy or being the cure all. So let's dive.
Well, no one is actually saying that it's. I mean, maybe there's some people saying that it's a cure-all. That's way too. That's getting way too excited. Um, that's jumping. That's being overly generous, I suppose. Got to be careful with doing that. But it's the closest you're going to get, I think. Not because of any additional interventions, but by subtraction. Again, just a reversion to what we used to do.
What's the buzz on social media? You see endless testimonials of dramatic transformations, miracle weight loss, and chronic conditions seemingly cured overnight with the carnivore diet.
Well, that's what happens whenever you're consuming a species appropriate, species specific diet. It's to be expected. Are we designed to be those things? generally. Evolution doesn't result in perfect organisms all across the board. There's here and there a few that don't survive. They have genetic problems and all that. And that's not, I mean, we're not pretending otherwise. But is that a general rule? Does that happen generally? Or are they very, very, very few and far between?
Paints this compelling picture of a seamless, effortless path to optimal health. But this isn't the whole story. The standard carnivore transformation post often features a dramatic before and after photo following some script like, I struggled with my weight for years, tried everything, nothing worked, went carnivore, and within weeks, my symptoms vanished, or I lost 50 pounds. It's
Yep. Doesn't happen to everybody. But yes, there are many, many, many anecdotes. And you know what? Once you actually learn about the limitations of human nutrition science, which is more important than actually what it can show, which is nothing, really, you start realizing that anecdotes are really the best you got. That's it. I mean, I wish it weren't the case, but it is. It's people saying, well, this worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. Okay. And then word spreads. That's literally how it works. Trial and error. I mean, we're done. We're done. Yeah, anyway.
cool. So these anecdotes are powerful and they spread like wildfire, but they fail to capture the crucial nuances, potential downsides, and the simple fact that individual responses to any diet and intervention will vary widely. They
Well, of course. But I just said it's the best you got.
show you the people who tried carnivore and saw no improvement or worse experience negative consequences.
Okay. So is that due to the carnivore diet or is that due to their past behaviors whenever they transition too impetuously, perhaps? Again, to use the oxalate dumping example that I used perhaps in another video, or maybe even now, I don't know. Whenever people go on carnivore, sometimes they can exhibit oxalate dumping. Um, is that the fault of a carnivore diet? Or is that the fault of consuming oxalates and oxalic acid for decades on end? Genuine question.
Don't talk about the importance of careful monitoring or the customized approaches that are necessary for success. And rarely, if ever, do they talk about when things go seriously wrong. The academic
I highly doubt that actually, unless they've already made a positive anecdote. Then perhaps no, because it's like they don't, they have a bias and they don't want to post about it. Like I get that, I get that. So then potentially different story. But
research paints a far more nuanced picture. So let's dive into the data and see how it contrasts with the hype. As I
all right, so okay, so this is clearly written by AI. I'm sorry, this is written by AI. Social media buzz. See how it contrasts with the hype, and she's clearly reading off of a script. Um, I'd be shocked if she weren't, and I'd be shocked if this weren't from ChatGPT. But um, anyway, anyway, yeah. So you want to dig into the data? Well, I'd love to dig into the actual data as well. I do that all the time, actually. So okay.
into this, it's important to acknowledge that the initial findings are in many ways quite positive. We are seeing
Yeah. So basically, you're looking at associations. That's great. I don't really expect them to not be um, positive, but anyway.
significant improvements for many individuals, particularly in areas like inflammation, autoimmune conditions, and metabolic numbers. These
Yeah. Inflammation is a pre programmed response that occurs in the body when it has perceived damage to tissues or a potential invading pathogen. So you can expect a diet that doesn't have a bunch of contraindications. Contraindicated. Buy now, link in the description below for paperback, hardcover, ebook, and self narrated audiobook versions because I'm all about authenticity, as you know, or at least as you should know. If you're new, now you know. Um, But yeah, if you're not introducing a bunch of contraindications into the body, like plant toxins that were not genotypically evolved to withstand, it seems. Um, and um, things like fiber, which is another one. Things like glucose, something that isn't even a macronutrient to begin with, definitionally. Link in the top right corner of the screen for a video I did on that. Well, then you can expect less damage to be incurred and less inflammation subsequently. Autoimmune issues, same thing there. Autoimmunity is undergirded by inflammation, but really, autoimmunity seems to be, from everything that I've seen, it's an example of the body attacking something, and then either the body's own cells suffer from the inflammation damage or the shrapnel sort of thing. They're just in an unfriendly environment, or they're actually targeted themselves due to things like molecular mimicry. That's potentially that's a theory. It makes sense to me. That's something else that could be happening. Lectins can cause that as well. So it seems. So yeah, this is all to be expected.
Benefits stem from three key factors. First,
Well, hold on a minute. The benefits stem from three key factors. According to whom, on the basis of what? That's a very, very, very convicting claim. This is your opinion.
the unique bioactive compounds found exclusively in meat.
Well, sure. That's one reason, I suppose. I wouldn't even say that's the most significant one. I'd say the removal of a bunch of toxins is. Anthony Chaffee sums this up quite well. He says it better than I can. But he says that basically all disease is caused by too much toxicity and too little nutrition, basically. So, this is another problem. I mean, if you've got too much toxicity from plants, too little animal-based nutrition, like too little nutrition in general, and you increase the nutrition, you could actually have worse problems if you don't cut out the toxicity. So then you would associate the problems with this factor when no, 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 no. They just react poorly with each other. If you just done this and then reduced this, you would have felt better than ever. So, something to consider.
The surprisingly high bioavailability of certain nutrients, and
Yeah, bioavailability is something. So again, that just goes right back to nutritional compounds that are exclusively found in meat, or they're more readily absorbed in meat. What about the absence of toxins?
finally, the profound metabolic shifts that occur when the body adapts to an all meat dietary.
So basically, what you're saying is that toxicity has nothing to do with this. No, nothing. So there's no such thing as plant toxins that were not genotypically evolved to withstand. I mean, here's a point that we need to focus in on. Plants are toxic. All plants are toxic. Now, you'll struggle to find someone that respects nuance and is objective and is as objective as I am and do in the health space, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, you will struggle. And so the reason I bring that up is because there's a lot of nuance surrounding that topic too. Yes, all plants are toxic. First of all, we need to cover why. Okay, because they're an organism and they have a pressure to keep living. Well, what does that mean? How does that explain it? Well, plants can't move around. They're anchored to the ground. So as a result of that, in order to discourage predation, what they need to do is they need to produce chemicals that are effectively poisons and toxins that discourage animals from eating them because that's the major form of predation that they're trying to hedge against and prevent. So there you go. They produce toxins. Now, great. The main pieces of nuance involved are okay, yes, plants are toxic, but they exist on a toxicity spectrum, so some are less toxic than others. And we've been hybridizing them to be a lot less immediately toxic, so they don't kill us upon consumption. True. And then number three, just because plants are toxic, that doesn't mean that by that logic alone, that doesn't mean that humans shouldn't be consuming them. Why? Because if that were the case, then there would be no such thing as an herbivore. Yes, plants are toxic, but there are literally herbivorous animals. So you can't just say, well, since plants are toxic, then no organism should be eating them. It depends on how long you have adapted to eating them. I mean, just for perspective, though, herbivores, as much as they do eat plants, they can only eat about one or two, or else they will die. If they eat more than the two types of plants that they are evolved to eat, then they will die because they haven't evolved to eat the others. The question is how long we have evolved to withstand the consumption of them. And from literally every single inference we have eaten plants to any significant degree, and nowhere near to the degree that we've been eating them since the last like 100 or 200 years, by the way, for 13,000 years. Now, that may sound like a lot of time to you if you're a new viewer. It's not. Because our species, if you include proto-humans that precede our current speciation, that being Homo sapiens sapien, has existed for 4.5 million years. Now, our current speciation has existed for 350,000. Hell, even just say 300,000. Great, so now divide 13,000 by 300,000, and then multiply that by 100 to find your percentage of time that we have consumed plants to any significant degree. And once again, it's not like 13,000 years ago we started eating plants like we do today. No. If you graph out the last 13,000 years, so 11,000 BC to 2025 on an x-axis, and the y-axis is the amount of plants that we've been consuming, the line really just is going to look like this. It's going to be like pretty much flat at the bottom. A little higher, of course, sure. Okay, that's what it looks like. So it's not even like you can say, well, for 13,000 years we've been eating plants. So no, but for how long? And in what quantities? And why did we start eating plants? That was because of an extinction of megafauna, and it was proving more difficult to hunt meat down and eat it. There are a lot of benefits to cultivating plants. They don't spoil the same. They are more transportable for that reason. It allowed us to pervade the planet and increase our ubiquity as a species. Yes, correct. But it also has many downsides. Tools all have certain purposes. All right. So that's really what I have to say about that. Not to mention that most of the plants, basically 99% of plants you see in the supermarket, didn't even exist like a few centuries ago. And if they did not exist in the forms they do today. They are far larger. In the case of fruit, far juicier, far starchier, far sweeter, far less, you know, you know, they contain a lot less fiber. Okay. What are some other inferences that we shouldn't be eating plants? That we can't digest fiber at all. Last I checked, if you can't digest something, you shouldn't be eating it. Every animal that is designed to eat fiber can digest it fully, completely, in a cecum. Yes, we have a cecum. And you know what? Attached to that is called an appendix. We have a super short cecum, and the appendix it's really what it seems to be is a vestige of a larger cecum from the past when we had a frugivorous when we were frugivores, because we have a frugivorous past. That's why we have their teeth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Before people say, well, that's why we should be eating fruit and that we're fruitarians. Look into positive and negative selection pressures, particularly the latter, and then get back to me, because that's not how evolution works. Okay, so plant toxins. She never mentioned that, but that's why I did.
However, the research also reveals a more complex reality, hinting at the downsides that warrant serious consideration. So I'm not
Well, no, it doesn't show any downsides of a carnivorous diet at all. It may suggest them, and that's a different story. And we can get into that.
just cherry picking studies to fit a narrative today. I want to present to you both the positive and the negative so that you and your doctor can make the right decision for your unique situation.
Doctors are not involved, or at least they shouldn't be, because it's not their job to be working with you on diet. That is not their job. Okay, what their job is to identify disease processes and then tell you about them and then refer you to a specialist.
Make the right decision for your unique situation. So, first, Some of the good. Meat is often simplistically reduced to its macro content, protein and fat. But the research shows that it's a complex matrix of bioactive compounds that have surprising benefits on the human body. Think of this.
Okay, so I don't know if she's got a stutter or something. I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds to me like she's reading from a script. Hillary is her name. Okay. I think what's going on is that she's reading from a script and it's AI generated and it's not her. I I I don't relish saying this. I really don't. I'm not kidding. I think that many people that view my videos, they believe that I enjoy doing this. I'm some sadist or something. I really don't. I don't at all. But I don't know. I have a problem with the lack of authenticity that seems to be exhibited here today. So I don't know. It's just me.
We used to think of the Earth's atmosphere as just this mix of nitrogen and oxygen. But now we know there are countless trace elements and compounds that, despite being in small quantities, play crucial roles in our weather patterns, in our climate. Similarly, meat contains a variety of compounds beyond just protein and fat that interact with our physiology in significant ways. First, we have something called carnosine. This is a dipeptide, two peptides, found in significant amounts in meat and has great potential as a cellular protector. So, science shows that it acts as this intracellular buffer and antioxidant, guarding us against cellular damage. And it's also this powerful glycation inhibitor. Glycation is that process where proteins get sticky and dysfunctional, contributing to aging and inflammation.
Whoa, now hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. AI here, because that's what she's reading from, is clearly biased right now. It didn't even say what causes glycation. It didn't even really say what it is. Wow. Glycation is the process by which sugar molecules, particularly glucose, but also, yes, fructose, but when we talk about, uh, arguably that's fructation, right? But okay. Where a sugar molecule covalently binds to a protein, rendering it dysfunctional. That's what it is. It's sugar that causes glycation. It's in the name. Of course it didn't say that, though. Of course it didn't. Why would it? Unbelievable. Also, carnosine, yeah, okay. So we're talking about reductionist elements of meat that may explain certain elements of a carnivore diet's positive associated effects with its adoption or whatever. I mean, I hate doing this. I really don't like this reductionism at all. Like, it can be fun to like appreciate the universe by like looking at this and going, "Oh, carnosine's involved in like, it seems to buffer against some things like, you know, uh glycation in this case, or like, you know, anything else. It just protects the cell more or something." It's like, that's cool. But what are the actual implications of that? Therefore you should eat all the carnitine in the world? No. No. Like that, what do you do with that information except to appreciate how cool nature is or something? I just, that's not my thing.
Remember from my other episodes the mention of AGEs. Carnosine seems to step in like this bodyguard, protecting against these proteins. Studies show that vegetarians tend to have lower muscle carnosine content. Why should we care? Because this isn't simply about muscle function. Emerging evidence suggests that carnosine plays a role in mitigating age related decline and inflammation.
Well, playing a role is just playing a role. It puts into question the significance of that role. It puts into question the associative strength. It's not really it's not really anything of too much utility, I wouldn't say. But yeah, vegans having lower carnosine in their muscles, I guess that's not really a shock, is it? Or at least vegetarians, I think she said. Not a shock.
This one you've probably heard about creatine. We all know
Yes, creatine is essential for brain and muscle function. In fact, if you actually didn't have creatine in your muscles would twitch for a contraction, and then they would succumb to irreversible rigor, and then you would die. So it's interesting. Your brain would also just be fried, basically. So,
That creatine is this powerhouse for muscle function, but it's also critical for brain health. So, our brain utilizes about 20% of our body's creatine. Plant based diets provide
that is highly dependent on phenotype, to be fair. But I'm sure that that level is held more constant than other values, like glucose, for example, glucose utilization in the brain. Yeah, that's even more dependent on your phenotype.
virtually no creatine, but a carnivore diet delivers a steady supply. Studies have demonstrated cognitive benefits, particularly with
They've been associated with cognitive benefits. There's a clear mechanism there, though. We'll be talking about this in my biochemistry course later on. If you're one of the 20 members of my cohort, congratulations. We're going to have a lot of fun.
with creatine supplementation in vegetarians. Now, a carnivore diet won't provide the supplementation levels of creatine, which are usually 5 to 10 grams in these research studies, but it will deliver significantly more than a standard diet, around 1 gram or more, depending on how much meat you eat.
Right. And there's also really no indication for consuming more than what's found in red meat, unless you want to make your muscles bigger in size or something, because of water weight or something like that.
Green. This is another fascinating one.
All right. So let's just take a look at this. Just take a look at this. I've been seeing this the entire time, but let's just show the video up on the screen here. Taurine, the metabolic regulator. See that on the bottom there? Okay. This is AI. This is AI. It's obviously AI. Headings, all that stuff, fine, but it sounds like her entire thing here is AI. The whole thing. And that's something to be wary of.
Taurine is abundant in meat, and it's not just another amino acid. It's a
Right. No, it's involved in um, the conjugation of bile acids, I believe. That gets into lipoprotein metabolism and stuff. There's another amino acid that's involved in that too. I believe it's glycine. So glycine and taurine, yeah, they're involved in the digestion process quite significantly. Yeah, cool. Yeah, you get plenty of it in meat. So good. So we're still talking about things that are just opinionated to be the most significant, the benefits of a carnivore diet. You can just pull them out of a hat, man. Like, oh, taurine, oh, carnosine or something. Or, yeah, there you go. There's benefits. Can't wait for the cons.
regulator of cellular calcium, bile acid conjugation, which is crucial for fat digestion, neurotransmitter function, and even mitochondrial protein synthesis. So, research
Okay, cool. I have no problem admitting to any of that or accepting any of that. Sure.
suggesting a potential role for taurine in regulating insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism.
Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. How? Insulin sensitivity. Jeez. People completely misconstrue insulin sensitivity in the first place, but I'll get into that later if it becomes relevant. Glucose and insulin sensitivity, glucose regulation and insulin sensitivity is all about carbohydrate consumption. That's what it comes down to. Always. It has nothing to do with taurine.
Away, meat provides a substantial dose of taurine, and higher taurine levels appear to correlate with improved metabolic function. Next,
Well, that's a correlation. What was the strength of the correlation? How repeatable or reproducible was the correlation? What was the signal to noise ratio of the aggregate, well, of the aggregation of the correlations done? what was the sample size of the aggregation, and what was controlled for and what wasn't controlled for, and were the people genotypically and phenotypically identical? Well, there's a big problem.
Bioavailability. It's not just what you eat, it's what you actually absorb. We're
That was textbook AI. It's not just this, it's that. Oh boy. It's not just this, N dash or M dash. It's that. Classic, classic. I'm sure that I could probably put a prompt in and it would say something exactly like that. It's not blah 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 blah. It's blah 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 blah. Anyway,
that the bioavailability of nutrients, how much your body actually absorbs and utilizes, can differ dramatically between animal and plant sources. And this difference has a
well, yes, because well, are there anti-nutrients in plants that actively interfere with the absorption of minerals and vitamins? Mainly minerals, from what I've seen. Yeah. What about oxalates? 80% or so of the calcium in spinach is bound to oxalate, and you won't even absorb that. That's something. Phytic acid, according to its pKa value and according to the pH of the solution in which it is introduced, will dissociate into phytate and hydronium. And as a result of that, what you will have is a binding of phytate to minerals, particularly iron and zinc, but interestingly enough, not iron and zinc found in meat because the chemical structure is too different. If you're a plant-based eater, it's more of a problem for you. What else is an anti-nutrient? Oh yeah, fiber. When it forms a gel in your gut before it actually enters the small intestine, or really, travels further down the small intestine and then into the large intestine, it sops up a bunch of nutrition. It's one of the reasons why they actually consider it to be a benefit, believe it or not, because they say, well, it can help you sop up a bunch of toxins. Um, what else does it sop up? And not to mention, why would that be relevant if you're not consuming toxins? Are we going to put that into question? Anyway, okay.
huge effect on your metabolism and health. The first big nutrient that's affected is iron. Heme iron is found exclusively in meat and has a special
Yes, it's really the most bioavailable. It's also not toxic. It is a non-toxic form of iron. Um, you will not find non-toxic forms of iron in plants. Not possible.
absorption pathway that makes it significantly more bioavailable than non-heme iron from plants. We're talking about a 40 to 50% absorption for heme iron compared to potentially as low to 2 to 10% for non-heme iron. So this
Yeah, so a signal that is that strong, in my opinion, kind of swamps the noise that would be introduced and is introduced from the lack of control of relevant confounding variables there. Bioavailability is able to be measured in protein, for example. Again, not perfectly, because trying to control in science is like impossible in a way. Depends on what you're actually doing. Measuring the amount of nitrogen containing catabolic byproducts in urine and fecal matter and comparing that to the amount of nitrogen consumed as protein in that same time period is kind of your best way of doing so. Um, and you find that you're in the single digits with bioavailability metrics with like broccoli protein, with soy protein. When with eggs and beef, you're talking about like 70 to 80%. Yeah, so as much as there is noise introduced because of the lack of relevant confounding variables being controlled for, I feel like that signal just completely swamps that noise. It's just my opinion, but yeah.
particularly relevant in states of iron need like pregnancy or after significant blood loss. B12 is another one. Vitamin B12 from meat sources
This has nothing to do with bioavailability. This just has to do with availability. B12 is not found in plants. You can't acquire it in plants. You cannot obtain it from plants. The only time that B12 is produced, literally the only way that B12 can be produced, is through bacterial fermentation. So animals that eat grass, for example, herbivorous animals, they derive their B12 from their own gut bacteria that ferment that fiber in the plants that they consume into B12. Humans don't do that. Another sign that we are not herbivorous. We must acquire it through animal nutrition. Done!
absorbed remarkably well thanks to the protein complexes that protect it during the digestion process and enhances its uptake. So absorption rates from meat can be as high as 89% depending on the source and come prepackaged with protein complexes. So it's not just present, it's optimized for your body to use.
It's not just blank, it's blank. It's not just present, it's optimized. AI.
This is different, of course, from the plant sources of B12. And then finally, of course, we've got proteins. Animal proteins consistently show higher digestibility and utilization scores compared to plant proteins. They
Yeah, I was just talking about that. So,
once again with cofactors like specific peptides and mineral binding proteins that further enhance their absorption and metabolic impact. Now let's shift to the effects on our metabolism.
so there was no, again, there's still no mention of plant anti-nutrients or plant toxins at all. All right. Well, good thing I got into that. Lectins, oxalates. Look into oxalate dumping. Seriously. I mean, unbelievable what these people have to go through.
Shift to a carnivore diet triggers this cascade of metabolic adaptations, essentially reprogramming the body's fuel utilization pathways. This is where we see some of the most dramatic and potentially double-edged effects. So
No, but so potentially, and again with the word potentially and may.
some people experience improved protein synthesis. Studies show that in meat-based diet, perhaps obviously, because it's highly bioavailable and protein associated cofactors, can lead to more efficient protein synthesis or creation.
Well, okay, the studies you're referring to can't show that it can. It shows an association, but the mechanism is very clear. We have to times, at all times, be extremely scientifically responsible with our reporting of the science. We must. I would think that you're a fool for believing that this doesn't suggest it clearly, but it doesn't necessarily prove it. This gets into epistemology.
That helps with muscle growth and repair. Then we have enhanced mineral status. So we get improvements of the various mineral markers like iron, zinc, and magnesium, like we mentioned before, due to the superior bioavailability of these minerals in meat sources. We all
Well, see, this is what I mean. She said due to, which is a cause and effect statement. Well, that's the fallacy of the single cause, isn't it? Because what about the absence of plant anti-nutrients? That's also another reason why.
get, this is important, stable energy levels. So the combination of highly bioavailable nutrients, consistent protein intake, and the shift to fat as the primary fuel source often results in more stable energy levels throughout the day, eliminating
So, you're going to mention glucose? Let's play it longer to see if she mentions the real culprit behind that, which is the absence of exogenous carbohydrates, the very macronutrient that, once again, is not a macronutrient by definition, that is not required for human beings post weaning. Is that the is that what you're talking about? Yeah, yeah. It's the absence of that. Most things in life that result in success and result in positive outcomes are counterintuitive. You would think that in order to regulate your blood glucose levels, you need to eat regularly, 3 meals a day with snacks in between to keep that blood glucose level up. You need to eat carbohydrates to keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. No, you remove all of them because then you have a steady demand driven flow of glucose for whatever your demands are at that given instance in time, at any given instance in time. That's how that works. So
those blood sugar crashes associated with high carb diets.
there we go. Okay. Okay. So good. She at least got that out of the way.
A lot of folks who try carnivore report this improved mental clarity, reduced brain fog, and an enhanced ability to focus.
Right? You can also have the exact opposite happen if you approach the diet in terms of transitioning to it impetuously. So you want to do it over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, really.
Add here is you could probably get the same effect by going very low carb or keto without completely switching to only animal sources. Then
Well, that's your opinion. I would tend to agree with that opinion, though, because yes, that really just has to do with blood glucose regulation. You could have lots of fun. You could go plant-based keto and perhaps have the same stable energy levels with respect to blood glucose level. However, what I will say is that that won't last too long, by my estimation, because you're missing out on critical nutrition. I'd rather you go on a high carb vegan diet than go on a plant-based keto diet. And you know why? Because your mitochondria have two substrates that it uses to create ATP. That's glucose, carbohydrates, and fat. Plant-based keto, you've got like no fat. Like none. I mean, what are you getting it from? Chocolate? Coconut oil? I mean, sure, you can get it from a bunch of olive oil and stuff. I mean, but how much olive oil are you really going to have to eat? I mean, seriously, that's yikes. So fine, I mean, if you want to do that, but also, and then when it comes to protein ingestion, you're having like very little protein in terms of absolute quantity, but also in terms of bioavailability. So it's a double whammy there too. Yeah, that's not. Whew, wow.
have weight management outcomes that are really beneficial in most cases. It's not universal, but a lot of folks who try the carnivore diet experience significant weight.
Carnival diet. She just said carnival diet. I suspect that that was. I presume that that was an error, a genuine error. But that's actually pretty funny. Anyway, anyway.
This is likely due to a combination of factors, including increased
It's really to do with insulin regulation. The most insulinogenic macronutrient, again, the one that isn't a macronutrient at all, is carbohydrates. They will spike your insulin, which is actually an indication that you shouldn't be consuming the thing because if you spike your glucose, that causes a spike in insulin to get the glucose level down. And oftentimes, what happens is what's called reactive hypoglycemia, where it does get the glucose level back down to baseline, but actually below baseline. So you become hypoglycemic, and then it stimulates your appetite again, and then you spike it again, and then dip, spike, dip over and over and over again. That's what happens. Hunger, headaches, lightheadedness, brain fog, fatigue, irritability, mood swings, all that. Yeah. So there you go. But yeah, anyway, it has to do with insulin because insulin is the prototypical anabolic hormone. Anabolism being the building up and storing of things. Okay, insulin is involved in lipogenesis, so the creation of fat, triglyceride synthesis, the creation of triglycerides, which are fats that are necessarily upon creation to be stored, glycogenesis, the synthesis of glycogen in muscle tissue for later use, um, also glycolysis, actually, which is sort of a mix between an anabolic process and a catabolic process. And there's something else that I'm thinking of, I think. Oh, muscle protein synthesis. Yes, of course. How could I forget? Um, so you don't require insulin to create and store all fat. You'll always have some fat on your body, but I mean, in reality, if you had no insulin, then you really wouldn't have any fat then, right? So it is effectively required because you don't have zero insulin ever. You always have some. So yeah, you have less frequent insulin spikes, and also the level of insulin is typically lower than even your baseline level of insulin when you're on a standard diet, especially if you've got some fat on you. There you go. That's the way to go, man. So anyway,
Satiety from protein and fat, reduce food cravings, and the potential metabolic advantage of ketosis. I've seen
oh my god. So no mention of insulin, no mention of carbohydrates, none. This is unbelievable. Seriously.
patients come to me claiming that they lost 100 or more pounds due to going to carnivore. And
Yeah, that's all because of satiety signaling. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not pretending like that's not the second major factor. I mean, you eat carbohydrates alongside meat, you can override a lot of those satiety signals that you otherwise would sense, and I think that has to do with hormonal regulation there. I mean, it really does. I really do. But that's clearly not the most relevant factor because there are many people that eat what's considered an animal-based diet when it isn't an animal-based diet, but with tons of fruit and honey alongside it, and they lose weight. I don't think nearly as many people lose weight on that diet, or at the very least sustain the weight loss than people that just go strict carnivore. But it does happen, and it's one of the most common anecdotes that you hear about from that diet. Look, there's a lot of response bias involved in all that, as she was also alluding to earlier with like regular carnivores. Um, but nevertheless,
really hard to convince people that you could get the same effects, but it is true. You can get similar effects by switching to a lower carb or keto diet without going completely carnivore.
well, sure. By the way, I don't know why the picture of carbohydrates was on the screen for that, but sure. Yeah, if anything, you'd actually lose too much weight. Again, when we talk about weight loss, we need to really be careful with what we mean by weight. Weight can be muscle, water, fat, bone density. It can be all four of those things. And so not all weight loss is good. If I cut my arms and legs off, if I cut my head off, well, I'd lose weight, but that's not a good thing. So the point of that is just to show that the way in which you lose weight is important. What the weight is made up of is important. We're talking about losing fat. We're not talking about losing fat and muscle, and that's the problem. A lot of people will lose fat and muscle whenever they go on Ozempic. They'll also go blind, apparently. That's interesting. Um, you'll lose, I mean, you can do the same thing whenever you go on a plant-based diet. You lose muscle and you lose fat. Okay, it's great that you lose fat. Great. But is every single method of losing the fat good and indicated? Well, I think it's pretty obvious the answer to that question. So that's what I have to say about that.
Sometimes it's just simpler for people to grasp a very restrictive diet like carnivore, which is why this seems to work for weight management. Then
Okay, so I wanted to let you get the whole sentence out. Yes, I know. Funny that I say that. But I did. Restrictive is an interesting word to use. Now we're getting into some tacit insertions of ideology here. I don't know if it was with malice aforethought. I think this is genuinely what she believes, and whatever. Like, fine, whatever. Um, I'll tell you what's restrictive, Hillary. I will tell you what's restrictive, Hillary. What is restrictive, truly, is being bedridden with diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, fibromyalgia, obesity, autoimmune conditions, etc. Um, Eating a carnivore diet compared to that is not restrictive in the slightest. People have completely forgotten, going back to the whole counterintuitive thing. Things that are most successful and breed the most success are usually counterintuitive. People have forgotten that self-discipline is not slavery, it is liberation. Okay. When you discipline yourself, You are being liberated. You can either be a slave. The archaic idea is that you can either be a slave to your own immediate desires and whims, or you could be a slave to God, right? That's the idea. I'm not going to say anything about God and like what atheism and agnosticism and creationism and like whatever it is. I'm saying that's the archaic idea in a sentence. That's like what that was all about. But it is true that there's elements of truth to that, which is that when you discipline yourself, it is actually a form of liberation. It's not some form of obsequious Stockholm syndrome. That's not what's going on. And so, and I think that's what a lot of people think it is. So when it comes to restrictive, we got to be careful with what we mean by restrictive. Um, yes, it is by definition restricting things, but is it appropriate to restrict things that you ought not to consume that are actually poisonous for you or toxic to you? Well, I think so. I mean, I restrict adultery in my relationship with my fiance, um, and the reason for that is because, well, that's the right thing to do, and also there's three types of people. There's people that don't deviate from the ideal, and they hate doing that, but they stick to it anyway. There's people that do deviate from the ideal and they hate themselves. There's people that actually there's four types of people. There's people that deviate from the ideal and enjoy it. And then there's people that don't deviate away from the ideal and actually enjoy it. They like that. When you've reached the last part, you know you've made it. So I don't have any desire to cheat on my fiance. Okay? That's not restrictive. I mean, it depends on what you mean by restrictive. I mean, it's restrictive that I'm restricting myself from doing that, but anyway. Anyway, okay. All right.
Course, we have that blood glucose regulation, which I alluded to, because when you eliminate dietary carbs, that leads to significant improvements in your blood glucose control and insulin sensitivity. This can be really helpful for
Okay, so again, with insulin sensitivity and acting like insulin resistance is a pathology when it is not a pathology. I've done a myriad of videos on this topic, and also I wrote about it in my book, Contrainidicated, where we talk about the Randall cycle. We get very, very intricate. We get very, very we get into the really intricate details of the Randall cycle. We get into, like Randall's original research. We get into the infamous graphics there. Um, yeah, lots of elucidation there. Um, very, very important to understand all of that. So, yeah,
this can be really helpful for people who are pre-diabetic or who have type 2 diabetes. Now,
right. Diabetes being the actual pathology at hand, which is chronically elevated blood glucose and nothing else. That is what diabetes is. That is what the actual pathology is at hand.
let's talk about the benefits of inflammation reduction. So, one of the most consistent findings is this marked reduction in inflammatory markers such as C reactive protein or
Well, what happens whenever you remove things that actively damage your tissues? Do you think you get a reduction in inflammation? Just a thought.
this anti-inflammatory effect might be a key driver of the improvements seen in autoimmune conditions and other inflammatory disorders. This is really interesting.
Well, again, autoimmunity. I just did a video on this. I'll link that in the top right corner of the screen. Inflammation is not the cause of disease. It is not the root cause of disease. Inflammation is another symptom. The cause of disease, as a blanket general rule with very few exceptions, okay? Very few, is external is external. Invading pathogens, so disease, like just external disease, all right? Even then, it's conditional because it depends on your environment as well. Um, it's highly influenced by the environment in which the pathogen is introduced into. But also, mainly, damage to tissues. Things that damage the body. That's it. That's it. What else would explain the vast amount of amelioration of autoimmune conditions that are considered completely irreversible and irremediable? I mean, seriously, what else would do that? What else would explain that?
Because classic medical teaching says that meat tends to increase inflammation.
Classic medical teaching tends to say a lot of things. It says a lot of things that are completely unfounded and, well, either based in lies sometimes. And I'm not actually a fan of cynicism, actually, as much as you sort of kind of have to have some cynicism or else the world will eat you alive. Um, but it's just true that they've either lied or it's just been based on fallacies that were innocently arrived at, but still, just wrong, nevertheless. Um, but who cares what they say anyway? Why don't you learn how to conduct your own science, investigate the universe using the scientific method by learning a philosophy, epistemology, and logic, and then statistics, and then there you go. I mean, then you can do whatever the hell you want yourself. Well, you do need money to conduct certain studies, but you can try and raise a bunch of money to do a certain study. So there's ways around things.
Starting to see that there might be some nuance in that statement and claim. In
Might be, really? Well, absolutely. Because if that were the case, then these people wouldn't be ameliorating their lifelong ailments that are undergirded by inflammation by eating a carnivore diet filled with red meat.
might be actually the fats and the storage of excess fats that's leading to further inflammation rather than the meat.
No. Storing fat is not inflammatory. Creating fat is not inflammatory. These are natural processes in the body. There is associated inflammation with all these things because of glycation that occurs, and also all the other things that you're consuming that can inflame the body and raise the propensity by which it has to sort of it can lower the threshold by which you'd have to attain or surpass in order to get into an anabolic state, let's say a fat storage state, because of the effects on redox potential.
This is a deeper topic, which I'm going to try and elucidate a bit more as we go on. Remember, these are some of the benefits, but they're intertwined with a lot of emerging concerns. Think about if you're tuning your engine
Concerns in your opinion.
for high performance, you might gain speed and power, but you also risk overheating or wearing out parts prematurely.
Okay, another AI analogy that is not applicable here. We get it. I mean, I understand. I understand. I get it. But I do try. I think maybe it's just a consequence of me getting older. I mean, I genuinely am. I still am young, and I'm aware of how young I am. I'm 22 now, as of less than a month ago. 22. I'm kind of getting less and less angry at these people, and just more and more understanding. I don't know, but I mean, there's still some anger in the claims, but not, it's not at the people. But I can't not say these things. Like, sorry, it's your opinion. It's your opinion. It's your opinion. It's your opinion. It's your opinion.
Very mechanisms that drive some of the positive effects can, in certain
Positive associated effects, might I add.
contribute to negative outcomes. For example, while enhanced nutrient bioavailability is generally beneficial, it can be
Okay, if you said generally, it makes it less offensive of a claim, but yeah, to say it's always beneficial, I mean that would mean that anything that is more bio, if you created something that's more bioavailable than meat, then it would therefore be better or something. It's like, no, no. Things that are more indicated for your physiology tend to be more bioavailable, but it doesn't mean that things that tend to be more bioavailable are necessarily appropriate.
problematic if it bypasses normal regulatory mechanisms. And while metabolic adaptations to a low carb state can improve insulin sensitivity, they might have
Again, insulin sensitivity is not the proxy or not, it's not even really a criterion of health. It's not. The blood glucose regulation is. That's the problem. That's the pathology.
unintended consequences for long term heart health and other physiological processes. I'm going to delve into the potential downsides in detail. They represent
I find it interesting that people say processes. I started to question whether I was wrong, but no, it seems like I think people just say processes because everything else, like analyses and all, like the formal terms of the plural, like the plural version of formal terms seems to they usually are and they end with ease. I think that people extrapolate that to that too. It's processes, interestingly enough. Um, I thought it was, and then I had to double check. I thought I was getting it wrong. Because as much as the appeal to popularity fallacy is a fallacy, things are what the majority of people do, given that we are social creatures, is typically correct. I mean, or else we wouldn't really function properly as a society. Um, but I mean, I guess that's why we're kind of not functioning as a society because it's become not that way um, as of recently. But you need to have a really good reason to not do what the majority of people are doing. So there you go. Since we're social creatures and we're cohesive and all that stuff.
a crucial piece of this puzzle, and understanding them is crucial for anybody considering or currently following a carnivore diet. So, while the potential benefits of a carnivore diet, particularly in the short term, are compelling,
Particularly in the short term, really. So define short term because short and long are value judgment statements. They're relative. Could short mean 10 years? Could short mean 1 year? Could it mean 1 month? What do you mean? Because I'll tell you what, I've been carnivore for years now. Years. And there are no downsides that I've ever experienced. None at all. I mean, the only downside is that since I have an addictive personality, when I see things like donuts and cake around me, I'm like, hey, I want that, but I know that I can't have it, and I don't have it. But I mean, again, that goes back to restriction, the paradox of restriction. I mean, it's not really a problem with the diet. I'm not having any side effects of the diet. Okay.
supported by some research, it's crucial to acknowledge and thoroughly look at all of the potential downsides. I've
So again, with the word potential, so it's a bunch of theorizing, which is really all you can do in human nutrition science, to be fair. But what it means, what it puts into question is the basis by which the theory is being posited. What is this? What is the substance behind it? I suspect we'll get into that. Can't wait.
seen in my practice firsthand that this way of eating is not a universally applicable solution. And
So, no, you haven't seen that. That's your opinion. What you've seen is that people that adopt a carnivore diet can have problems. That's not that that doesn't mean it's not the right solution. I'm sorry. That's not what that means. It means that people are having problems and they need help solving those problems. All right. It doesn't necessarily implicate the carnivore diet that they are on. And it could very well be because of how quickly they adopted it, the things that they cut out, maybe the things that aren't in their carnivore diet that should be. Maybe it's dairy. So there you go.
the risks far outweigh the benefits. While
You have no evidence to support that claim. This is your opinion, and that's fine. But we need to be very careful with that.
research is still early, it's painting a picture that warrants more caution, in my opinion, and consideration than what social media seems to imply. So,
You will struggle to find someone that enjoys nuance in this topic than me. You will struggle. I have tried desperately to seek out nuance that disproves my points. The nuance that I've discovered has not discounted my points. It has made things more nuanced in the discussion and in the logic undergirding my conclusions and my convictions. For example, I've said that, oh, well, maybe depending on who you are, your ancestral lineage. This is literally the only thing that has actually changed, in my opinion. The only thing. Maybe you require about 20 grams of exogenous carbohydrates a day, maybe, depending on your ancestral lineage. And it would be absolute maximum 50. There's no reason to go above 50. And again, 20 is my major. That's like my main. There's no reason. Okay? And if you're someone that's metabolically deranged from a past diet of, you know, not good stuff. I've also now said that carbohydrates can be used as a drug because sugar is a drug. Link in the top right corner of the screen for that. It can be used as a drug for enhancing to get more reps in at the very end of an exercise bout when you're approaching failure. It seems, and the mechanism is quite clear there. The question still remains as to whether you should do that. It depends on your goals, but it could actually harm the muscle more. It's really the only things that have changed for me, which actually tells you something. It should tell you something.
A quick summary of the areas of concern. First, cardiovascular health. This
We're going to deal with this. Seriously? Cardiovascular concerns. A looming, look at this, look at this. A looming question mark. Hillary, come on with the AI, please. You can do better. And I know that you can, by the way, because you're intelligent.
of the areas of concern. First, cardiovascular health. This is the most significant and hotly debated area of concern around carnivore diet.
Okay, well, I wouldn't deny that. It's highly debated and is the most significant concern for people. Yes, both of those claims are true. Yes. We'll get into cholesterol's role in heart disease really soon.
A lot of proponents point to the improvements in inflammatory markers and triglyceride levels, but the research
Okay, yeah. So put aside triglyceride levels for a minute because even those are ambiguous in terms of the implications of the levels. Someone can exhibit higher triglyceride levels when going carnivore when they're losing massive amounts of weight. So that's something. Generally, yes, higher triglycerides are not great. They're indicative of a problem. They're not a problem in and of themselves. They don't damage tissues or anything like that. But it's a sign that you've got a lot of insulin going on. You've got lots of fructose intake. Um, Liver overburdening phenomenon. Um, but so that's just put that aside. Put that aside. Improvement in inflammation. Well, that's what you should be looking at. Heart disease is caused by damage to the arteries. We are done. Plaque will not accumulate in arteries unless you are damaging the arteries and they are chronically damaged, or you are genetically abnormal and you are exhibiting a situation whereby the genes, you have a genetic knockout where you cannot sequester excess cholesterol from the bloodstream, whereby you will die before you reach the age of 13. Not by atherosclerosis, by the way, but by cellular starvation. They do have atherosclerosis, but story for another day.
reveals a more complex and concerning pattern regarding other crucial cardiovascular risk factors. First, looking at your lipid panel, your LDL cholesterol.
There is no need to look at a lipid panel. Your cholesterol levels, your total, your LDL, your HDL, any of the lipoproteins, any of the subfraction of the lipoproteins are all determined by your genes, those genes having evolved for millions of years in your speciation, if you include proto-humans that precede our current speciation, that being Homo sapiens sapien. They are not a problem because cholesterol will not end up in arteries, once again, without lesions to the endothelium. Damage to the endothelium and the epithelium, actually, are required for heart disease to develop. Unless you are once again genetically abnormal, in which case you will be dead before the age of 13 oftentimes, or or you have damage to the arteries. Once again, if I didn't already say that, I've said it about 1,000 times, so I don't know. It's that carnivore brain fog. It's the lack of carbohydrates. Goodness me. Unbelievable.
Tends to increase with the carnivore diet.
Right? So what? So first of all, no. LDL cholesterol isn't a thing. LDL is a thing, and cholesterol is a thing. All right? I've said this before many times. And I used to, I was starting to get to a point, I really was, I admit it. I admit that this was the case. I was starting to get to a point where I thought that I was wasting my time and I thought that I was just being captious and just, just unnecessarily pedantic. I really did. Because obviously, what most people, like, what they mean by LDL cholesterol is just cholesterol that's carried by LDL. It's just an efficient way of saying it. And perhaps that's the case for some people. But I'll tell you what, right when I was about to stop saying it, I reacted to another physician who said, cholesterol is, or she said, what did she say? Cholesterol is required to move fat around the body. And I went, no, lipoproteins are. Oh, she confused lipoproteins with cholesterol. So all that did was just rejigger that line in my head. It's not cholesterol. Clearly, we do need to specify. It's not cholesterol. It is a lipoprotein carrier for cholesterol. Yes, it tends to go up in the people studied for the duration of time that they have been studied on people that adopted a carnivore diet. Yes, that is true. How long were those people studied for? Because LDL levels fluctuate quite a bit. Not to mention, LDL levels are not measured. Did you know that? They can be measured, but it's expensive. They are estimated using a regression sum with an error around it. It's a calculation. So there's error around that signal. Anyway.
This is what we sometimes refer to as bad cholesterol, where you're
not cholesterol and not bad. Okay, if it were bad, your body wouldn't produce it, would it? It produces it to some degree. All right? It's not like it's some kind of byproduct either, and that's why it's present in the body. Because then you could still say, well, then it's bad because your body's excreting it. No. Like formaldehyde, for example, as a byproduct of metabolism. No. Your body literally has genes that encode for its production. Because that's what genes are involved in. Genes are involved exclusively in the production of a protein and nothing else.
version of the lipids. Sometimes LDL cholesterol levels can double or
not cholesterol,
triple, exceeding recommended ranges by a considerable margin.
Okay, so so what? Recommended, okay, let me ask you a question, Hillary. Do you know how these recommended ranges are established? It's very simple. Very simple. If you're going to think in the mind of a scientist and you wanted to say, okay, for our country, for the United States, for Spain, for whatever country you may be in, Sweden, if you thought, okay, so what would I do if I can't measure every single person's LDL, lipid level, whatever it is that you want to measure? How would I go about making a general recommendation for people in terms of like a normative range? Not even a recommendation, but just a range that's considered normal for people to be within. Well, the best thing that you can do is you could access the databases of every clinic that you can get your hands on, access those levels of cholesterol or LDL, whatever it may be, and aggregate all of those values into one line of data, into a data matrix, as they call it. And then what you do is you find you use measures of central tendency. So your mode, your median, and your mean. Okay. Then you assess the distribution of that, the shape of the distribution. All right. So you have, the incidence rate on the left, also considered probability, which is not true. Incidence. And on the x-axis, you will have cholesterol level, or in this case, LDL. And then you'll form a probability distribution, so an incidence distribution, really. And according to Pearson's second coefficient of skewness, you will determine whether or not you should use the mean or the median. And then you find the average, and then plus or minus the standard deviation. So that's one way of finding the average normative value. If you're wanting to find a normative range, what you would do is you would find your probability distribution, and then you would basically find where, I don't know, let's say 50%, you could, it's up in the air whether you want to do, however you want to do this. 50% of your data lies within what parameters. You'd find what levels those are. And then what you do is you'd say, okay, here we go. This is the value, and then you would say, okay, so even though I didn't measure every single person in my country or in this group, however, wherever I'm trying to apply these results to, this is my best inference. This is the normative range. Okay. You'll also see that people will actually employ inferential statistics most often, not descriptive. So what we just described was descriptive statistics. They'll try and employ inferential statistics, whereby they basically um, collect an entire, you're talking about all of the values of people, like all the LDL values in this case from every single person. Let's say that you collected like 100,000 people, but that is a subset of the population, right? So then what you do is you pretend like you collected a hypothetical infinite number of simple random samples on the population, and you form a sampling distribution of the sample mean, and then you try, and basically using standard errors and t-distributions and all that, you try and construct a confidence interval whereby you're 95%, 90%, 99%, whatever confidence level you want to choose. You're 95% confident, that's typically what it is, that the actual population mean, the population average, will lie within these ranges or something like that, or this range. So it's between, these values are your normative ranges. That's actually most likely what they were doing, or what they do, which is completely inappropriate. So putting literally all of that aside, all of it, all of it, okay, all of it aside, is it the case? Three things. Is it the case that you can be within those ranges and still exhibit symptoms? Is it the case that you can be outside those ranges and not exhibit symptoms? And is it the case that you want to be normal? Look around you at what normal is. Okay, I think we're done.
We know that this can lead to heart attacks and stroke.
No, oh my. Oh, no. What leads to heart attacks and strokes is instability and rupturing of soft plaque that forms a blood clot. Okay? The plaque is made up primarily of cholesterol and lipid deposits. Correct. Fact. Now, question, why is the cholesterol there in the first place? It is because it is there to repair the tissues there, because 40 to 50% of cell membranes, of all of the trillions of cells in your body, are composed of cholesterol. That is it. Okay? Then what can happen is the cholesterol, if the damage to the arteries, if the lesion continues to persist because of continuous damage, because you keep eating poorly, what can happen is the LDL will stay there because now it's just having to has to stay there. And eventually what happens is the LDL can become either oxidized and or glycated because of hyperglycemia, which causes it to be deranged, which causes the body to launch more inflammation on the area, which causes more damage because of ROS production and all that, and then you have problems. We're done. We are done. That's why cholesterol's there. Cholesterol isn't just randomly there. You have to ask yourself why it's there. Okay? That's why it's there.
And beyond just the LDL cholesterol number, research shows that LDL particle number and ApoB, which are more accurate predictors of cardiovascular risk.
Not risk, incidence. And also, oh man, statistics. Predictor is not inappropriate to use. I will say that. Because you're basically just building a prediction model. Whenever someone says predictor, they're talking about a probability. Because a lot of times people equate probability synonymously with a prediction model. Really, what probability is something that cannot be informed upon. It's an ideal. The idea that you can actually determine the probability of something occurring, like the chance of something occurring. That's not possible. When you form a probability, which is based on a relative frequency of an event occurring, based on a sequence of chance experiments and trials, what you're doing is forming a prediction model for the future that may or may not be correct. That is what you are doing. So when she says LDL or LD particle number, LDL particle number, LDLP, and ApoB, when she says that these are more accurate predictors, what she means is that whenever these prediction models are relied on or employed, the outcomes associated with those predictions are more in line than other prediction models. However, were those prediction models based on the same studies over the same periods of time, the same methodologies? Were they done the same amount of times? Because if not, you can't compare accurately the prediction models because they're based on completely different sets of data. So to say that there's a more accurate predictor than another when they're based on completely different data is asinine. Not to mention that association doesn't equal causation. Association, I made a shirt saying exactly that for that reason.
LDL cholesterol alone frequently also rise on the carnivore diet.
So what?
These metrics reflect the total number of atherogenic particles in the bloodstream.
Nope, not atherogenic, because the suffix genic implies the generation of something else, which is a cause and effect statement, and causality cannot be informed upon in statistics. Descriptive statistics, nope. Inferential statistics, definitely not. It makes no claims about causality. I did a video with data analyst Thomas Mashram from the UK, where he actually does a presentation showing exactly why that's the case, proving that to be the case. Okay? We're done.
So essentially, the number of vehicles carrying cholesterol that can contribute to plaque formation in the arteries.
It can contribute to plaque formation in the arteries if there's damage to the arteries or you're genetically abnormal.
Elevated particle number and ApoB are strongly associated with increased risk of atherosclerosis.
No, they're not associated with increased risk of anything. They're not associated with any decreased risk of anything. They're not associated with a neutral risk of anything. Not risk. We're done. Also, strong is a value judgment statement. I know that there are objective metrics that are used to try and, inform upon strength in statistics, but I'd love to see those associations, Hillary. What was the sample size? What was the statistical power? Was there statistical significance? What was the signal to noise ratio? When it came to the variables that were actually measured, like the dependent and independent variables. What was the signal to noise ratio? If you have an X axis and a Y axis here, okay, just imagine that. Just imagine an L shape, okay? An L shape. And you imagine data points on there and a line, okay? Your Y axis is your dependent variable. And the X axis is the independent variable. The X axis is called the independent variable because it's the one you're changing. The Y axis is the dependent variable. It's the one that responds to the change, which again, implicit in that terminology is the idea that they're causally related. Isn't that interesting? They're not really independent or dependent necessarily. You don't know that. It's your opinion. But anyway, putting that aside. If your Y axis is your incidence rate, of like death or something, and your x-axis is cholesterol level. Well, you collected data for cholesterol level of like a bunch of different people. Well, what was the average cholesterol level, and what was the average, I guess, incidence rate of death? Um, like in terms of in years or something like that. Because if it was actually just an incidence rate of death, that wouldn't really work. You can't really. There's not an average. It was just like it was either people with this cholesterol level had this much death occur. Like 40% of people had this cholesterol level when they died. It's not the same thing. But like, let's say incidence rate of death, age of death, age of death. Okay, you collected information on age and you collected information on cholesterol. Well, what was the signal to noise ratio on cholesterol level? Was it like 200 plus or minus, I don't know, 200? That probably would not be the case because you'd have 0 and 400 as your ranges, but potentially because it's just a mathematical function. Sometimes you can have values go into the negatives when in reality that's not possible, but they could still be calculated that way. And then in terms of age of death, what was that? Because if the signal to noise ratio was so out of whack and so weak on those variables, I don't even care about the strength of the association because the data was too noisy. The data that makes up the regression is too noisy. Anyway, science and stuff.
And cardiovascular events like heart attacks or strokes. Then we have oxidized LDL, which
Right. So again, I just covered when oxidized LDL actually exists and when that is even a thing in the first place. Good.
modified form of LDL, which is particularly
The most atherogenic form of cholesterol. It says it on the screen. This is it on the screen right here. The most atherogenic form of cholesterol. Okay, so again, we need to be careful with our characterizing and our terminology. Okay.
atherogenic, meaning it's more likely to contribute to the development of atherosclerosis.
No, not more likely, because that is a probabilistic statement. You are making causal claims, Hillary. I'm sorry. I'm rooting for you. I am. This isn't it.
Research suggests that ox-LDL
Good use of the word suggests, because that doesn't mean it proves it.
levels increase on a carnivore diet,
Whoa, 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 whoa. How? What the hell are you talking about, Hillary? How does that make any sense?
potentially exacerbating cardiovascular risk. There's going
Mm, are you going to explain the mechanism there?
a lot of naysayers out there. I know it's true that inflammation plays an critical role in the development of heart disease, and
Inflammation, again, I just did a video on this. Inflammation is not the root cause of anything. Damage is.
we do tend to see improvement of inflammatory markers like we mentioned before. However, the elevated LDL particle number and the ApoB are still independent risk factors.
No, they are associative factors. We're done. That is not the same thing.
Not this either or situation. Think about it like this. Reducing inflammation is like fixing potholes in the road, which is great. But dramatically increasing the number of cars on the road, the LDL particle number and the ApoB, still poses a significant risk, even if the road is in better condition.
No. Okay, this is another AI analogy. They always like to use these analogies. They're a little odd.
These lipid outcomes are still under hot debate. However,
They are, but they shouldn't be. Damage to arteries is the cause of heart disease. We're done.
physician, given the well-established link between elevated LDL particle number,
A link is an association. We're done. Two variables could be directly causally, sorry, two variables could be directly associated with each other with an R squared value of 1, complete perfect linear association, and still not be causally related, because there can always be a spurious variable that is linking X and Y together intrinsically. And if that spurious variable or confounding variable is removed, it completely uncouples the link between X and Y. You see it all the time.
B and cardiovascular risk. I think that this evidence points more towards negative outcomes, especially for people with a personal or family history of heart disease.
Okay, well, that's your opinion, and it's founded in a complete misunderstanding of cardiovascular pathophysiology. It is very, very simple. Cholesterol does not cause heart disease. If that were the case, well, then, I mean, look, you just said, well, the amount is what really matters because, I mean, even if you fill up those potholes, that damage, the amount will still contribute to plaque buildup. Well, if that were the case, then why doesn't atherosclerosis occur in veins? They carry the same amount of cholesterol as the arteries do. The only time that you'll ever see atherosclerosis develop in veins is whenever you introduce a vein into a high pressure area of the vascular system via a surgical bypass situation. Hint, hint, wink, wink. High pressure, abrasions, anyone? Damage? Interesting. Not only does it only occur in arteries, by the way, it occurs in set sites in the arteries, those sites being the sites that exhibit the most turbulent blood flow. They exhibit the most turbulent blood flow. That's how this works. Turbulence is just the deviation away from a smooth and steady flow of a liquid, of a fluid. It causes swirling and eddying of blood. And what happens is that exerts extra pressure around those arteries. They usually occur around the bifurcations. So the aortic arch is an example of this, the inverted U shape. The arteries are quite resistant to shear stress, which is just the isolated, concentrated source of abrasive force against parts of an artery where the blood is. So you'd expect, oh, well, high pressure will cause damage to those parts. Yes, some, but almost all of the atherosclerotic plaque actually it occurs on the undersides of the U shape, actually, because the swirling and eddying of blood causes most of the pressure to be exerted around those areas, and it causes damage there mostly. So most of the plaque builds up there. To a repeatable degree, leading to like it makes it 100% predictable. Even in people that are genetically abnormal, develop plaque all across their vascular system, like sickle cell anemia patients, they develop most of their plaque in those turbulent areas. Still,
A lot of these benefits that we see with carnivore that I mentioned, the lower triglyceride number, the lower inflammation, you can also get with a low carb diet without going completely carnivore. Second, let's talk about the gut micro.
well, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Again, should we be consuming plants as a species? But anyway, now we're going to be talking about the gut microbiome. Did you hear that? Good. Can't wait. Can't wait.
The human gut microbiome is this complex ecosystem of.
Tell us about how complex it is, because we actually know nothing about it. We know that there are trillions of bacteria in our guts. That's about all we know. So, yeah. Good. Great. All right. Tell us all about it.
Trillions of microorganisms, and it plays
Trillions. There you go.
a role in our digestion, immunity, and overall health. The
Of course. Yeah. What about it?
carnivore diet, by its very nature, drastically reduces the intake of dietary fiber and plant.
Correct, which you don't want anyway, because it causes microabrasions to the gut lining, which is why it is associated with an upregulation of mucus secretion. Name me one instance in the body, where mucus is upregulated in its production outside of the context of irritation to the tissue. Okay? My nose runs whenever it's irritated. All right? When you eat spicy food, plant toxins, it's literally why it burns your mouth. Yeah. That causes your nose to run, right? That's literally what happens. Your nose runs because you have irritation. Your body launches immune responses, inflammation, in response to spicy food. Okay? You start clearing your throat a bunch, mucus. All right? Here's something. I'm not saying this to be lewd or anything like that. I mean this strictly objectively speaking. Vaginal discharge is thicker when you're sick. If you're a woman, that's what happens. It is. I know that it's not exactly mucus per se. I mean, it actually could very well be a constituent of that. I would not be surprised. That's another example of it. There is irritation going on to the system, and so that's what happens. But of course, you want to eat fiber because it actually increases mucus secretion in your gut because mucus protects you. That's literally the reason why they say it's a good thing. Well, because mucus serves to protect you, so you actually get an increased mucosal layer. What? No, that's not how that. Well, in that case, you should always be subject to allergens outside. You should always have a stuffy nose because, well, you're getting more protected. What? You should get super fat because it protects you from injury. Huh? Anyway, yep. The very thing that we can't digest. Like once again, I think I said this in the beginning. Okay. One of the reasons why we know that we're not herbivorous and shouldn't be eating plants. I mean, just take a look. Take a look at the ramifications of the agricultural revolution 13,000 years ago on the robustness of our skeletal system. Teeth falling out of our head, missing teeth, rotting teeth, crooked teeth, just a complete shrinkage of our body, malformation of the skeletal system. We're at the occiput, especially. We're definitely designed to be eating plants, though. That's definitely true.
Compounds that are known to nourish their beneficial gut bacteria.
Hillary, I'm about to stop. Hillary, two things here. Number one, there is no way to establish whether there is. No, let me back up. Let me back up. Let me be careful here. There are two ways that people have tried to establish beneficial gut bacteria as being beneficial or harmful. So, gut bacteria in general being beneficial or harmful. The first way is atrocious, which is basically studying people in a prospective fashion in a longitudinal study and measuring and assessing their gut bacteria, like isolating one out of trillions and saying, oh, well, this person has a higher amount of this than this other person, and this person lived longer, so therefore it's a beneficial gut bacteria. Yeah, that's actually what they do. I'm not kidding. Bad. There's another way of doing it, though, which involves basically assessing what the bacterium is involved in doing or producing. So we have gut bacteria that produce serotonin. We have a lot that produce serotonin. And it's considered a good gut bacterium then because it's involved in the production of a mood regulating hormone that's involved in making us feel good and feel content. Okay. Fine. The question remains, are there other gut bacteria that will then be cultivated when embarking upon a carnivore diet approach that will do the exact same thing, if not to a greater degree, and or if not more things? Well, it is a possibility, considering the fact that your gut microbiome adjusts to the environment in which you place it. Okay, which brings me to my next point. You said, oh, it's been proven to nourish gut bugs, the beneficial gut bacteria that they have. Who, me? No, not me. I don't have those gut bacteria. What are you talking about? Those gut bacteria don't exist in my gut because I didn't feed them, so they're dead. Why are you acting like we have the same bacteria? That's not true. There's a paper that I cited in my book, and I've cited it in my videos before, which is, well, about how your gut bacteria on a meat heavy diet change actually relatively quickly to basically metabolize a compound called TMA, so trimethylamine. There was concern that it was actually converted into TMAO, which is considered atherogenic, which it still can't be informed upon, but let's just say for the sake of the argument that it was. Gut bacteria eventually started to be cultivated that metabolized either TMAO even further into something else that was considered innocuous, or it completely bypassed TMAO production and just converted TMA into something else entirely first. Either way, the takeaway was, oh, so it's actually nothing to worry about. Your gut microbiome adjusts to the diet in which you place it. There you go. given a sufficient amount of time to adapt to it. There you go. Done.
Is essentially prebiotics. And a lot of us,
So is meat, because it feeds my gut bacteria, because I have different gut bacteria.
longevity physicians, focus more on prebiotics than even the probiotics themselves. Because if you
Well, fair enough. I focus on my prebiotics every day.
got the good stuff to feed the good bacteria,
Okay, so again, begging the question right there. It is begging a complete question, which is whether or not these gut bacteria are even beneficial in the first place. Do you require them for survival? Because clearly I don't. Am I having any problems? Nope.
follow without having to buy really expensive supplements. So
Well, you don't have to buy extremely expensive supplements on a carnivore diet. In fact, you don't really need to supplement at all. I don't supplement. No need.
around carnivore diet is revealing some concerning trends. First, we see reduced microbial diversity.
All right, I'm done. Knew we were going to get to the gut microbiome diversity thing. Yes, because all diversity is good all the time. Yep. Yeah, that's a criterion of health. Yeah. But how many colors did you eat today? How many colors of the rainbow did you eat today? How many, what is the dietary requirement of colors again in the human diet? What's the dietary requirement for colors? What's the dietary requirement for what is the physiological requirement for microbial diversity? None. I don't know what we're doing. I really don't know what we're doing. So anyway, I was waiting for some new stuff. I suppose I presume we're not getting that. We're not getting that today. So anyway, Hillary, I'm really sorry. I am rooting for you. I am. But this was not good. This was not good. This is not good information. This is misinformation. So maybe read my book. That's really what I would suggest, and binge my videos. So binge my material. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to me as well. If you haven't subscribed yet, I don't really know what you're doing. You're welcome for reminding you. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, yes, buy my book, Contrainidicated, a closer look and revision of mainstream health axioms that have perpetuated illness, disorder, and disease for over a century. If you have not bought that book already, as I alluded to earlier, you're getting a little peek of all the graphics in there, a little bit. Maybe I can find some. Ooh. Subscribe to the Patreon as well to gain access to 1 week early uploads, ad-free content, uncensored content, loads of antiquated videos from before I was ever a public figure, loads of Patreon exclusive uploads from whenever I was actually uploading those on a regular basis to every week, and also an exclusive Discord server for tier 3 members if you're into that. And also, finally, the link on the bottom of the screen. What is that link? Well, that is a link that will bring you to an amazing site with amazing products from an amazing brand known as Cerule. If you purchase product through that link, you will get a permanent percentage discount, permanent free shipping when signing up for monthly deliveries. And if you email me behind the scenes at edgoki@pm.me, I can tell you how to earn those products for free, because who in their right mind wouldn't want that? But before buying any product whatsoever, including these ones, I wouldn't recommend doing that at all until you learn about the products in further detail, which, fortunately for you, I have the ability for you to do, which is linked at the top right corner of the screen with a Cerule Products video, which is a complete video explanation of what these products are, who should take them, why you should take them, when to take them, etc., etc. And I'd also further migrate to the description below to find a video that I did on these products in further detail, as well as the company of Cerule itself, which I think is incredibly important if you're willing to make a contribution towards the company via purchase. So, with that being said, join me next time when we're reacting to more ignorant science, really. I think that's the best way of putting it. Just more ignorance, even if it's innocent. Um, about heart disease, about statistics, about gut microbiota, etc., I suppose. So, till then.